Pope Leo XIV stopped the dedication ceremony when he saw an usher taking a 79-year-old widow toward the side gate. The choir had reached the second verse. The bishop had already raised his hand to bless the restored chapel. And less than 6 hours remained before a private developer was scheduled to sign the final papers for the land beneath it. The widow did not argue. She only held a small iron key against her chest and apologized for making people wait. Her name was Eleanor Whitmore. For 42 years, Eleanor and her husband Samuel had cared for the 12-acre property behind St. Agnes Parish. They maintained the memorial garden, repaired the chapel roof, and delivered meals to seniors who could no longer drive. Samuel had died the previous winter. His grave was already prepared beneath a maple tree beside the chapel. But that morning, Eleanor had been told the burial could no longer happen there. Bishop Vincent Harland had approved the sale to Northbridge Development. Luxury apartments and private medical offices would replace the chapel, meal hall, and cemetery. Eleanor had tried to hand Pope Leo XIV a copy of the original deed. The bishop's staff had stopped her. "Holy Father," Harland said, stepping down from the platform, "Mrs. Whitmore is distressed. We were trying to spare her a public embarrassment." Pope Leo XIV looked at the key in her hands. "What does it open?" "The chapel," Eleanor said. Harland answered over her. It opened the chapel. The locks were changed this morning. The Pope looked toward the old building. Red tape crossed its doors beside a drawing of glass towers and landscaped balconies. Why was the lock changed today? Harland gave the patient expression of a man explaining necessity to people ruled by emotion. "The property is entering a protected transfer period. The ceremony must be protected from disruption." Eleanor lowered her head. "I only wanted to place Samuel's rosary inside before they closed it." The Pope held out his hand. She gave him the iron key. Its teeth were worn smooth, and a small brass tag carried one stamped word: "Home." Pope Leo XIV turned toward the choir. "The dedication will wait." Harland's face did not change, but his thumb pressed hard into the edge of his ring. He said every legal review was complete. The sale would rescue 3 parishes, repair a school roof, and reduce diocesan debt. Then he said the sentence he had repeated for months. "We are not selling history. We are securing the future." Pope Leo XIV looked past him toward the red tape on the chapel. "Then the future can wait 6 hours." The private signing was set for 5 o'clock. By 11:15, the Pope had ordered every deed, survey, cemetery record, donor restriction, and development agreement brought to the parish hall. Harland believed the documents would end the discussion. He did not yet understand why the Pope had kept the useless key. Bishop Vincent Harland had governed for 9 years. He was courteous, disciplined, and trusted by wealthy donors. He never raised his voice. When decisions caused pain, he spoke of stewardship and responsible sacrifice. The parish hall filled with binders before noon. Harland's finance director said the property was expensive to maintain. The cemetery produced no income, and chapel repairs were estimated at $400,000. North Bridge Development had offered $6.8 million. The senior meal program cost less than $22,000 a year. Pope Leo XIV let the two numbers remain in the room. Harland opened a blue folder. The diocese cannot preserve every building simply because someone remembers it fondly. Eleanor sat near the back wall. She had placed Samuel's rosary beside the iron key on the table, as though the two objects belonged together. The Pope asked for the original deed. A lawyer produced a certified copy dated 1947. It transferred the land from Eleanor's father-in-law to the diocese for $1. There were no visible restrictions. Eleanor removed a folded copy from her handbag. Her version contained an additional page. The missing page reserved the property for burial, prayer, and aid to elderly residents. If those uses ended, the land would pass to a charitable trust rather than private developers. Harland did not look at the page. That copy has never been authenticated. My husband saw the original, Eleanor said. Your husband was not an attorney. No. He repaired your churches. The bishop closed the folder gently. Mrs. Whitmore, grief can make old papers feel more certain than they are. The words were soft. That made them worse. Pope Leo XIV watched Eleanor fold the page along an old crease. She folded it once. Then again. Her hands were steady until the paper began to tear. The Pope reached across the table and stopped her. Where was the original kept? In the chapel's safe. Harland answered immediately. There is no safe. Eleanor looked at him. There was when Samuel changed the combination. For the first time, the bishop's finance director turned toward Harland instead of the Pope. Harland said the chapel had been inspected twice. No safe had been listed. The development attorney checked the clock. The buyer's representatives would arrive at 4:30. If the signing failed, the diocese could owe a large cancellation payment. That was the clean explanation. A legal sale. An unreliable copy. An emotional widow. A deadline that made delay seem reckless. Pope Leo XIV asked whether any other property could be sold. Harland said no suitable alternative existed. Then the Pope opened the development agreement. One parcel was marked Bishop's Reserve. It included the hill above the memorial garden where a private residence was planned. Who requested this? The Pope asked. The development attorney said it was an accommodation for visiting clergy. Harland corrected him. A pastoral residence. Nothing more. The Pope turned another page. The residence carried lifetime occupancy rights for one unnamed senior church official. The room became still. Harland's voice remained even. It was included to preserve a visible Catholic presence on the property. Pope Leo XIV looked at Eleanor. They will remove your husband's grave and build a Catholic presence above it? Harland's ring struck the table once. We are securing the future. The Pope gathered the key, the rosary, and Eleanor's damaged copy. Then he stood. "Take me to the chapel." Harland rose too. "The building has been sealed." Pope Leo XIV placed the iron key in his palm. "Then we will learn whether this still opens anything." The red tape came away with a dry tearing sound. The new lock on the front door did not fit Eleanor's key. Harland seemed almost relieved. Then Eleanor led the Pope around the building to a narrow cellar door hidden behind overgrown ivy. The iron key turned. Inside, the chapel smelled of damp stone. Dust covered the pews, but fresh boot marks crossed the aisle. Someone had entered recently. Eleanor walked directly to the third panel behind the old sacristy cabinet. Samuel had built it after a pipe burst 30 years earlier. She pressed the wood, and a shallow recess opened in the wall. The safe was gone. 4 bolt holes remained. Harland stared at them. Pope Leo XIV did not accuse him. Who ordered it removed? The bishop said maintenance records would have to be checked. Retired caretaker Joseph Bell followed them inside, leaning on a cane and carrying keys he no longer needed. He said the safe had been removed 3 weeks earlier by a diocesan contractor. Where was it taken? Joseph looked at Harland before answering. The bishop's archive. Harland's expression hardened. That is speculation. Joseph pulled a yellow work slip from his coat. He had found it beneath the contractor's van after the men left. The destination line read, "Private Records Room." The Pope asked Joseph why he had kept it. The old man rubbed the paper between his fingers. "Samuel told me never to throw away a thing powerful people forget to pick up." The chapel held other evidence. A burial ledger listed 118 names. 37 graves had no surviving relatives. The relocation plan described them as unclaimed remains. Eleanor stopped at one entry and touched the ink. Mary Harland. The bishop's mother. Harland had grown up nearby. After his father disappeared, the parish meal hall fed him and his mother through 2 winters. When she died, the Whitmore family allowed her burial in the memorial garden without charge. Harland had never mentioned this connection during the sale. Pope Leo XIV looked at him across the narrow chapel. "Your mother is here?" The bishop's face seemed older. "She was. I arranged a private transfer last month." Only 1 grave had already been moved. His mother's. The other dead were scheduled to wait until construction began. That was when Eleanor finally understood. Harland had not forgotten what the land meant. He had protected the person he loved before selling the burden of everyone else to strangers. If this story brings to mind someone whose years of quiet service were treated as disposable, write their name in the comments, and let that name remain. The Pope walked to the meal hall. Boxes of canned food still lined the meal hall. Eleanor's handwriting filled every Thursday on the volunteer calendar. Even after the program closed, she had continued checking expiration dates and delivering what she could from her own car. On the final page, one name appeared beside every week. Bishop Harlan's mother, no salt. Eleanor had delivered meals to Mary Harland until the old woman entered hospice. Harland saw the name. He reached for the page, but the Pope placed his hand over it. No. The word was quiet. It stopped him. At 2:30, the archivist confirmed that the chapel's safe had been delivered to the bishop's archive and emptied. The original deed was not listed among the contents. Sister Agnes Marlowe remembered an envelope bearing the Whitmore name. Harlan's legal advisor had taken it after signing a receipt. The receipt had not been destroyed. At 3:10, it was found in a scanning log. At 3:40, the legal advisor admitted that he had been instructed to classify the final page as an unenforceable devotional statement rather than part of the deed. At 4, Northbridge's representatives arrived. They carried champagne in a wooden case. Pope Leo XIV ordered it placed unopened beneath the table. Then he made a decision no one expected. The signing would proceed at 5 o'clock. Not in the bishop's office. Not in the parish hall. It would take place inside the old chapel, in front of the families whose dead were being called unclaimed. "Bring the contract," the Pope said. Harland looked toward the doors. "And bring the safe." At 4:58, the chapel was full. Northbridge executives sat on one side and families of the buried on the other. Eleanor remained in the first pew with Samuel's rosary wrapped around the key. The removed safe had been placed before the altar. Its paint was scratched and one hinge was bent. Bishop Harland entered last. He carried the sale agreement in a black folder. Pope Leo XIV stood beside the altar, but wore no ceremonial stole. There would be no blessing. The developer's attorney reminded everyone that the purchase option expired at 5. The clock above the chapel door moved to the hour. Harland opened the folder. Pope Leo XIV asked one question. "What is this land for?" Harland did not answer immediately. The diocese must think beyond sentiment. That was not my question. The bishop looked at the contract. It is an asset entrusted to the church. The Pope pointed to Eleanor. "What is this land for?" Harlan's practiced calm began to fail. "For ministry, when ministry is sustainable." Pope Leo XIV took the original deed's final page from Sister Agnes. The paper had been found inside a legal file marked Historical Correspondence. It carried the same signatures and seal as the pages already certified. The missing restriction was genuine. The land could not be sold while burial, prayer, and elder care remained possible there. Northbridge's attorney immediately asked for a private recess. The Pope refused. The company president admitted Harland had promised the restriction would not interfere and confirmed the residence was reserved for him after retirement. The bishop turned toward him. That arrangement was for continuity. Eleanor spoke from the pew. "You moved your mother first." Harland looked at her. She did not sound angry. "You made sure she would not be under the machines." No legal phrase could survive that sentence. Pope Leo XIV placed the burial ledger on the altar and read the first 5 names listed as unclaimed. A teacher, a veteran, a parish cook, 2 widows. Then he asked Harlan to read the next name. The bishop's eyes moved over the page. He could not speak. The next name was Samuel Whitmore. Samuel had not yet been buried, but his reserved place was already marked for clearing. The Pope held out the iron key. "Who gave you the right to sell his place before his widow could bury him?" Harlan looked toward the door, then toward the people he had expected to outlast. "I believe the sale would save the diocese." "Did the diocese require a residence for you?" "No." "Did the poor require this meal hall?" Harlan said nothing. "Did your mother?" The bishop's hand slipped from the folder. That was the moment his defense ended. Pope Leo XIV did not humiliate him with shouting. He did not invite applause. He made the truth physical. He asked the Northbridge president to bring the signature page forward. Then he handed the pen to Bishop Harland. "You will not sign the sale." Harlan's shoulders lowered. "You will sign its cancellation." The developer objected. The Pope asked whether he wanted the court to examine a contract built on the concealed restriction and private benefit. The objection ended. Harland signed the cancellation at 5:12. But the punishment that followed was what shook the Vatican. Pope Leo XIV removed Harland from all financial authority effective immediately. He ordered an independent review of every property transaction approved during Harland's leadership. He required the bishop to submit his resignation and remain available to civil investigators. Then he rejected the customary quiet transfer. Harland would not disappear into another residence while staff repaired the damage. For 30 days, under supervision, he would restore the memorial garden, return every marker, reopen the meal hall, and meet the families he had treated as obstacles. A senior advisor whispered that such a public assignment would be seen as degrading to the episcopal office. Pope Leo XIV answered without looking away from Harland. "Service does not degrade the office. Avoiding it does." He then announced the restitution. The bishop's reserved residence would never be built. A different unrestricted property would be sold to cover urgent debts. Northbridge would pay the cancelled preparation costs after proceeding despite the disputed covenant. The chapel and cemetery would be placed under a permanent charitable trust. The meal hall would reopen within 10 days. And Samuel Whitmore would be buried in the place promised to him, without charge, before the end of the month. Eleanor closed her eyes. Her hand still held the key. Pope Leo XIV removed the new lock himself. Joseph Bell fitted the old mechanism back into place. The Pope returned the key to Eleanor. "Open it." Her hand shook once before the iron turned. The door moved slowly. Outside, seniors waited along the path, unsure whether they would ever enter again. Eleanor held the door open. No speech was needed. They came inside, one by one. A woman with a walker touched the first pew. A veteran removed his cap. An old man carried 2 cans of soup. Harland remained beside the altar. Pope Leo XIV gave him the burial ledger. "Read their names," the bishop began. His voice was barely audible at first. Then it steadied. He read all 118. After the final name, the Pope placed the unopened champagne case beside the kitchen door. "Return it," he told the developers. Then he asked Eleanor what meal Samuel had loved most. "Beef stew," she said. "Too much pepper." The Pope looked toward Harland. "You will serve it on opening day." Harland nodded. For the first time, he did not explain. 10 days later, the White Meal Hall opened before noon. The first pot of stew was prepared from Eleanor's old recipe. Bishop Harland stood behind the serving counter in a plain apron, filling bowls for people whose names he had once reduced to a budget line. No cameras were allowed inside. The memorial garden was restored. The private residence hill became a public orchard with accessible benches. Samuel Whitmore was buried beneath the maple tree. After the service, Eleanor walked alone to the chapel door. The old iron key hung from her wrist beside Samuel's rosary. A new brass tag had replaced the one stamped home. It carried 4 words, a promise still kept. She turned the key, opened the chapel, and left the door wide enough for the next person to enter. The land had almost been sold because powerful men called it an asset. It was saved when someone remembered it was a promise.